Good evening. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Ishan Russell. Tonight, we focus on Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Barack Obama's third meeting in a year. They're meeting on the sidelines of the UNGA in New York, but in store is a lot of thrust for Indo-US diplomatic ties, the strategic interests that we share, and the economic ties as well. And we'll be focusing on all that and more over the next half hour with our special guest, Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty joins us. He is the former Secretary MEA and a distinguished fellow at ORF. K.P.Nayar joins us. He's the consulting editor at the Telegraph. We're joined by Dipankar Sarkar from the Mint and Hindustan. We're also joined by Professor Christopher S. Raj, from the Center for Canadian, US and Latin American Studies at JNU. So, KP, I'll start with you. A very simple, basic question. The third meeting in a year, India is emerging as one of the most strategic partners for the United States in terms of the previous history that we had shared with the US. That's gone under a complete change. And what more can we expect now?
Well, I have a slightly different view. I think that the most important agenda in Indo-US relations is really economic. I mean, strategic is there, but it's just a shell, because for the United States, the priorities now are essentially the Islamic State in the Middle East, Ukraine. Our region doesn't figure much. Afghanistan does, but Afghanistan, things are going much better than anybody expected, and certainly the Americans expected. So, strategic subjects, while they figure, I think have actually taken a back seat.
You're saying that
economic things have taken the front seat, actually.
All right, but Mr. Chakravarty, is that really the case? Because a lot of reports constantly suggest that it's a strategic partnership. The fact that there is the entire question over the South China Sea, China's rise, and that entire strategic alliance that sort of is being created. What do you think would be primary on the agenda? KP says it's all about economics for now.
Well, let me make one thing very clear. There is no strategic alliance as of now. There is I would say it's work in progress. And it will progress only when very strong economic ties are built. And India grows and continues to grow at more than 7% over the next decade or two, which will bring India's economy to the levels that businesses in the US find it attractive to come, and it upgrades our technology and manufacturing base. And I think Prime Minister Modi, Make in India program, etc., are geared towards that kind of a objective. But strategic, you don't get into a strategic, you may say that it's a strategic partnership, but the elements of a strategic partnerships are not there fully. They are, as I said, work in progress. It's building up.
All right.
And obviously the changing the dynamics of the Asian sort of strategic sort of structure, or the flux that we are in today, the rise of China, etc., South China Sea has been mentioned. All this will play into our elements of that build-up. But we are not there yet.
All right, we're not there yet. Professor Raj, as far as the big defense deal in this visit goes, that's just been signed with Boeing for the Chinook and the other helicopters, and it's worth a couple of $1 billion. So in that sense, is that just economics, or is that strategic, or how do we define that? How do you define this relationship now?
See, I agree with the strategic alliance, but certainly there is strategic relationship, which moved in the direction beginning with Bush improving our relationship in nuclear field. That was a major breakthrough. We have created problems by bringing in the aspect related to our domestic needs, and created difficulty in the processing the deal. Second is, the way I see a strategic relationship is, there is a shift in the US relationship in terms of arms transfers. We were totally dependent on the Soviet Union. We are still dependent, but the deals have come in, as you have rightly said. Apache deal for $3.5 billion has been worked out. It's a major deal.
Right.
So that has happened because of a new relationship that has emerged. One can say the end of the Cold War contributed to this. But the arms transfers deal is very significant, in terms of, Soviets, we had the advantage of no spare parts problem. Americans, we have a problem in the supply of spare parts. So that needs to be worked out, and the monitoring system. The other thing is, the past you have already, heavy, apart from helicopter, they have already also signed, C-2 aircrafts, which are heavy, carrying loads for the Indian Army, and the Indian technology is with the United States. So strategic ties and strategic relations do operate because they don't sell. When you look at the strategic alliance, the weapons are sold without any hesitation. Here, obviously, the Congress plays a role. The companies play
a lot of domestic political as well as other
But a political decision has been made for arm transfer, which is a strategic relationship which results in a balancing in the region, with the region with China.
All right, so perhaps to counterbalance China is what you're suggesting. Dipankar, I was reading from your newspaper only the fact that the rise of India as one of the biggest US arms buyers, it's a significant shift. And is this the way we're going to see more engagement? And in terms of this arms transfer, while there is arms deal, there is a lot of talk about technology transfer and whether that is playing a critical role enough in our relationship. Do you think that technology and economy are the main driving thrust, and arms deals such as this are a byproduct?
I think, the relationship between the US and India is far broader than some of these parameters that we are talking about. First of all, let us not forget that the world's largest democracy and the world's oldest are together in a venture that is, to my mind, probably more far-reaching and more important than merely strategic and economic components. I think politically, the U.S. is a very important partner of India. There are all kinds of areas to do with technology, not just defense. I mean, of course, India is a major. I think there was some news about the second largest buyer of arms today.
Right.
Of course, that component is there. But technology for Indian use, there's a whole the importance of Modi's visit to the West Coast, to Silicon Valley, is massive. As in the years to come, decades to come, all kinds of spin-offs will take place. And again, I must emphasize, not only in the defense, in the area of defense, but if the plans go, if the plans fructify, then there are all kinds of areas, such as the whole digital India plan, which is, very closely tied in with e-governance.
Right.
There is also, my distinguished co-panelists talk about the strategic alliance. Let's not forget about the importance, let's not overlook the importance of the US in the South Asian region, particularly vis-a-vis Pakistan. So yes, I think that, there are all kinds of areas, there are interesting areas that we can talk about this visit.
All right, KP, coming to you, as far as the idea of the changed India that we're seeing in terms of just how we present ourselves diplomatically, I think that has been a major impetus where it's a lot of personality-driven diplomacy with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and that's certainly playing a role, and it counters, balances very well with how the US president also conducts his diplomacy. So in that sense, both of them taking a leaf out of each other's book?
Yes, but the chemistry between leaders has always has limitations, especially in the US context, because we don't realize, we talk of the American president being the most powerful man on earth in political terms. But what we don't realize is that the American president has severe limitations.
All right.
You know? I mean, what we want, for example, US investments, American companies coming here, the president is hardly in a position to do anything, unlike in many other countries.
Perhaps the media also a little bit overplays the importance of personalities in this. I want to get in.
No, I must also mention that in the run-up to the visit, several American company heads put their heads together and wrote a letter to President Obama listing items, 1, 2, 3, 4. These things have not been done since the last meeting. You know?
Right.
Instead of creating a hype about all this, I think we should what we should really do is to consolidate what has already been done in the last 1 year.
Very important point, Mr. Chakravarty. The fact that, has enough movement happened since the leaders last met? And there are critical issues other than the fact of what happens bilaterally between the two countries, but on multilateral fora as well. Climate change is a issue that both leaders would really be focusing on, and we could expect major announcements there.
Look, what happens is that you promise things during such high-level visits, and there is a bit of hyping up of the promises and expectations. But when you come back and draw the balance sheet, you'll have to really look at what has actually moved on the ground in India.
Right.
Because investments, manufacturing, those who want to invest in India from the US and other countries, which is what we want them to do, will look at for example, the ease of doing business in India. They will look at things, and these issues have come up, I think, in the discussions that Mr. Modi has had with the business community in the US. The other thing is that how much can you expect the leaders to do, despite the chemistry, despite their bonhomie, and despite the willingness and their clear indication that this should be done. One example, of course, was the nuclear deal with the US, which was, I believe, was led right from the top rather than from the bottom, because I don't think the American bureaucracy was at all enthused about the nuclear deal. But it was President Bush who pushed it, and it was a top-down kind of a thing that happened. Now, you're really talking about a top-down effect, but how much does it percolate and gets done on the ground is a very pertinent question, and we need to examine that much more.
All right, Professor Raj, I'll get you in on the issue of climate change, because that has been a lot of leaders' top focus as far as the negotiations for Paris next year go. So in terms of that, do we expect much conversation to happen? Because as far as Prime Minister Modi is concerned and President Obama, both have been talking about this separately, but India and US really do not see eye to eye on this issue.
Can I just add one dimension before I come to this? You see, no Indian Prime Minister was able to organize the diaspora the way Prime Minister Modi has done, to a level of even mania situation.
Right.
And the advantage is one of the PhD work done by is the aspect that he could bring the diaspora clear together, and they would be a very important role in the political exercise of the elections and the involvement. So we need to look at that aspect influencing the American political decisions. So they do have an identity, and they do have a money power. They do play an important role. So the next election in 2016 is very significant. Obama, people say, is a lame duck, but he can deliver historical decisions for India, as Bush did. Towards the end of the thing, he got the bill passed by the Congress, and he was, you may say he was a lame duck, but as Secretary has rightly said, it was a top-down decision. And so this aspect we need to keep in mind. That, and the second aspect, the other prime ministers did not enjoy a PhD, which I have gone through, the able to put together diaspora mainly because Hindu element of temple culture in California and New York is very big. The number of temples. So these associations, this BJP could mobilize, which Congress with a secular ideology could not do it. So it has really built up the climate in America. Now coming back to your climate change. I do agree that this climate change, as we approach November, December of the Paris conference, there will be some understanding. On the issue of equity, India is coming down. On the issue of, because we have population is this high, the equity should be distributed, or the climate change aspect should be discussed on the context of the emission by the number of people advantage to it. We bring in development aspects, they bring in lifestyle, life-changing lifestyle aspect. But what has happened in this November 2014 is China and the US have agreed to a political understanding on climate change. China has agreed to put a cap by 2030, and America by 2030 said 32% of emission will be reduced, and there would be a process. So when major developing countries, because China and India were together on climate change, that there is a breakup now. So India will have to find a new solution to accommodate its interest. And I think one of the new challenges India would be insisting is, while they will insist on climate change reduction of the emission of gas, they would also seek for green technology, and the relevant IRP, international property right, may not be pressurized on them, so that this aspect could be more effectively, funds from the development funds is needed. We are not objecting the difficulty of the climate change, but what the developed nation is not giving fund, not green,
the responsibility
green
of
technology.
Each nation in that.
When there is a breakthrough, I think India will say we are agreed. But you give us this option also.
All right, Dipankar, do you think this will probably figure in the dialogue between the two leaders? And also, as far as, we've seen a new impetus as far as UN reforms go. And they're meeting on the sidelines of the UNGA. India has been really, we've seen a lot of impetus on that front. So do you think that could also figure in the conversation?
I think as far as climate change goes, it's certain to figure. I'm quite certain of that. I don't think there'll be a lot of pressure on India on climate change. I think there's broad understanding of how much India can give in a give and take world of climate change. I think there was initially some pressure when China and the US came to this landmark agreement. But I don't think anybody's expecting something very similar from India. Having said that, I don't even think, equally, I don't think that anybody expects India to be the deal breaker, which it can clearly be. I mean, it is history, as they say, is on India's side on this. I mean, there are historical issues to do with developed countries and climate change. I think 30th September, if I'm not mistaken, is the deadline for countries to come up with nationally developed indicators, which they will have to then honor between 2020 and 2030. And I think the Indian side will be ready with, from what I hear, from a pretty good package. It may not be the Chinese, deal, but it'll be a pretty good package. So, and as my colleague as the professor from JNU said, technology transfer has been for a long time a very serious issue with developed countries, and rightly so, because rich nations have held back from transfer of technology. They have talked about everything except transfer of technology. And if Prime Minister Modi is able to drive this point a bit more forcefully than others, then that would be a fantastic thing for not only India but for the entire developing group, in Paris, who will be negotiating the deal.
All right, but KP, I'll get you in on the UN reforms now. The meeting on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. So, in that sense, do you think because of the impetus that we've seen in terms of India clamoring for the UNSC seat, do you think that could figure in the conversation?
Well, if I may very briefly go back to what we were discussing about climate change, I don't think the pressure will be so much during the Obama-Modi meeting. There's a meeting scheduled when Sushma Swaraj goes back to the US. There's a meeting scheduled on her first day between John Kerry and Sushma Swaraj. That is where the pressure will come, and then again, it's not for altruistic reasons. You know, in America, everything is commercial.
Right.
You see, John Kerry has been going at us about eliminating this hydrofluorocarbons because in Massachusetts, he has companies which are producing the alternative technology. And he is from Massachusetts, you see. So his whole emphasis is on getting those companies into India.
Right.
Nothing to do with really the altruistic part of the environment. That he will push, and that is where the pressure will come. But on UN reforms itself, you know, there is progress. And if we are steadfast, there will be further progress. But I am afraid in our public discourse, we don't seem to realize that there are several stages to be gone through yet. You know, I mean, for example, the amendment of the Charter. The amendment of the UN Charter will be the big challenge. But we are not there yet, you see.
Right.
So, but we need to go. There is another school of thought here which says that we are not going to get the seat, so why bother? You know, we have to go through with this at some stage or another if we want reform. You know, it's gradual. It's great. It's a bit like the nuclear deal, actually. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, irrespective of the merits of what we wanted in terms of civilian nuclear technology, the ultimate goal, which we haven't reached yet, is the recognition of India as a nuclear weapon state under NPT, you know. Same way, there are several stages to go through, but we must be steadfast. Our next big challenge should be to ensure that the Jamaican ambassador continues to be the president of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Group, because he has been very favorable to the G4 position, you know. So there are struggles at every stage, and we need to hold together the G4. We need to press, but we have a long way to go. But it's a road that we need to
many
traverse.
miles to go. But Mr. Ranjan Chakravarty, at the end of the day, this meeting has taken place. It's been over an hour since the leaders have been talking. And I mean, the fact that there were outcomes defined when the previous meeting happened, and as you pointed out, that there was concern of where is the action on those deliverables. Do you think new goals, new parameters would be set, new milestones could be achieved, or defined targets defined? Or do you see this kind of a meeting just adding more impetus and just trying to ensure that everything, all that the previous commitments are in order?
What will happen is that when Prime Minister Modi comes back, there will be obviously some kind of a review of what has happened and what kind of messages that they have got from all these very large the American companies, etc. As to, they must have told him that, look, Prime Minister, could you improve this, that, and etc. So they must have definitely given him some of that kind of thing. So I think it's for Prime Minister to come back and then have his meetings here and find out as to how best those things can be implemented. But the politics of the whole situation will also come in. You have GST, land, etc., and all those issues still hanging. And how that plays out is also going to add to the ease of doing business, etc.
In India. All right, on that note, we'll have to wrap it up. Thanks very much for coming in, all of you, on The Big Picture. That was a special presentation on Prime Minister Modi and President Obama's meeting in the United States. Thanks so much for watching.